Hello everyone. So this topic is about microbial nutrition. Basically, in this topic, you will learn on what are the things that microbes love to eat or prefer to eat in order for them to grow and survive. At the end of the topic, the student should be able to define what is nutrition, what is nutrients, and what are their subcategories based on the need and the quantity. You should be able to also differentiate between organic and inorganic nutrients, describe the main categories of nutritional types and among organisms, and lastly, distinguish different types of autotrophs and heterotrophs and their energy sources. So in simple diagram, this is what microbial nutrition about. So we have the chemical substances that is being utilized by the cell, and then those chemical substances is important for the cell to do metabolism and grow. What is nutrition? It is a process by which chemical substances called nutrients are acquired from the environment and used in cellular activities such as the metabolism and the growth of the microorganisms. So the nutrients contain bioelements such as carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, sulfur, and so on. So of course, the microbes do not just take, single carbon or single hydrogen. So all of these bioelements contain in compounds such as sugar, carbohydrate, protein, as well as in, lipids and other things. Essential nutrients are the elements that must be provided to the organism in order for them to grow. And these nutrients, depending on the quantity that they are needed, so they are grouped into macronutrients where they are needed in large quantity. The second one is the micronutrient or called trace elements. They are needed in small quantity. So the micronutrients play important roles in cell structure and the metabolism, important things in the cells. So without this, of course, the microorganism cannot survive. So even though micro elements and trace elements are needed in small quantity, but they are very important too. So these micro elements or trace elements are important compounds or substances um, for enzyme function and maintenance of the protein structure. Without these elements, the enzyme cannot function. The protein structure cannot be well built. So therefore, so next we're going to look into what are the macronutrients and micronutrients. One of the important categorization of nutrients is based on the carbon content. So these nutrients are categorized or grouped into organic and inorganic. So I'm sure that you have you have heard about these organic and inorganic materials. So what is organic? So organic are molecules that contain carbon and hydrogen. So it must have carbon and hydrogen, not just carbon or just hydrogen. So these molecules nearly always a product of living things. So it presents in all living things. For example, the simplest organic compound is methane, because it has CH3, right? The simplest one. And the large polymers of organic compounds are carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. So those are the macromolecules that is in the group of organic compound. Inorganic compound composed of an element or elements other than carbon and hydrogen. Okay, most are minerals deposits in the crust of earth, bodies of water, and atmosphere. So for examples, metals and their salts, for example, magnesium sulfate, that doesn't have carbon, right? Ferric nitrate, sodium phosphate, and gases, and water. Even the water, we have hydrogen, but it doesn't have carbon. So that's why it is under the inorganic compound. Now let's have a look at the chemical composition of a bacterium. So this one is E. coli cell. So what does it have? So it has organic compounds, which are proteins. So proteins are present in the membrane structure, and of course enzymes and so on. It has nucleic acid, the DNA, right? The chromosome, the genetic materials. We have carbohydrate, lipids, and other things. So those are organic compounds. Also, we have the inorganic compounds. So water and others. If we pecahkan lagi all these organic compounds and other inorganic compound, we can, then you can get, or you can measure how much carbon that is present. So a lot of carbon, 50% of the dry cell weight is actually carbon, and the rest are actually oxygen, nitrogen, hydrogen, phosphorus, and so on. So these are elements that are present in these organic compounds, as well as the inorganic compounds. So this is actually my favorite part of the topic about terminology. So how we can easily identify or understand about the different groups of microbes based on its name. All right, so we have different terms for different groups. For example, the root of the name is troph, meaning food or nourishment. So those trophozoite means the feeding stage of the protozoa. Extremophile means to love. Either you have extremophile, for example, an organism that has adapted to love extreme environment. We have also psychrophiles, organism that is adapted to cold environment. Thermophile, hot environment and so on. So phile means to live. Ob means to live. Microbes means to live small microbe, small organism. Hetero means others, a mixture. It's not homo. That means an organism that requires elements from other organisms. All right. Auto means self, autotroph, organism that feeds by itself. Photo means light, phototroph, organism that uses light as the energy. Chemo, chemical, organism that use chemicals rather than light for the energy. Sapro means rotten. Sapro is an organism that lives on dead organic matter, such as fungi. Next one is halo. Halo means salt. Halophile means organism that love high salt environment. Okay, thermo means heat. Thermophile, organism that love heat or grow that in high temperature. Psychro, organism that grows at cold temperature. So now we talk about the classification of nutritional types. So all organisms can be classified metabolically according to their nutritional pattern. Number one, based on the source of energy. Number two, based on the carbon. So remember just now we talked about the carbon, organic and inorganic. And also just now we talk about the different terminology. So you're going to use all the term here in this classification. Now let's have a look at the different groups based on the energy and the carbon source. Right? So based on energy, there are two types. Those that use chemical and those that use light as energy. The group that use chemical is called chemotrophs. The group that use light is called phototroph. It's easy, right? Chemo for chemical, photo for the light. So those, and then we have the different group based on the classification based on carbon source. So chemotroph that use organic compound or carbon dioxide. So those that use organic compound is called chemoheterotroph. So chemoheterotroph means, hetero means group that need other or that relies on other things or other living organisms. Chemoautotroph does not rely on other living organisms. So, and then depending on the different final acceptor, now we can see what kind of organisms that are in the group. So those that use oxygen is called as the electron acceptor in the electron transport chain, right? So all animals, including fungi, protozoa, and the bacteria. And the one that doesn't use oxygen as the final electron acceptor in the electron transport chain are further divided into either they're using organic compound or inorganic compound. So they are the fermentative streptococcus, for example, that use organic compound, and the clostridium use inorganic compound as the organic compound as the final electron acceptor. Let's shift to the next group. So those in the phototroph that use organic compound as the carbon source is called photoheterotroph. All right, so what are the organic compounds that they use? Organic acid, fatty acid, carbohydrate. For example, so the Examples are the green non-sulfur bacteria and purple non-sulfur bacteria. The second group is the photoautotroph. It does not rely on living organisms, right? So they use water and water to reduce the carbon dioxide. So depending on which elements or compound that they use to reduce the carbon dioxide. So if yes, it is called oxygenic photosynthesis, oxygenic organism that go through oxygenic photosynthesis, which are plants, algae, cyanobacteria. So during this process, oxygen is being produced in the process of photosynthesis process. And if they don't use water, it is called anoxygenic photosynthetic bacteria, which involve green and purple bacteria. So during this process, oxygen is not produced, use sulfur compounds or hydrogen gas to reduce the carbon dioxide. Now let's have a look in detail the grouping. Okay, carbon and energy-based nutritional types of the microbes. So there are two groups, two classification. One is based on carbon, carbon-based. The other one is the energy-based. So carbon-based is either heterotroph or autotroph. Energy-based, either phototroph or chemotroph. You must remember the terminology. Okay, very easy. Hetero means it relies on other living things. Auto means it does not need other living things. Okay, photo means light. Chemo means chemical. Okay, let's go to this carbon base first. First group is heterotroph. It's organism that must obtain its carbon in an organic form. Where do you get this organic form? It is from other living organism or other life form. All right. So this heterotroph is also known as organotroph. Organic, organotroph. Hetero, dependent on other living things. Okay, that's heterotroph. I hope you understand and easy to remember. I think this information. The next group is autotroph, organism that uses inorganic carbon dioxide as its carbon source. So carbon source, the carbon comes from the carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is actually an inorganic compound. And this autotroph able to convert the carbon dioxide into organic compound, okay, such as glucose and so on. They are not nutritionally dependent. They are independent on other living things. So they are also called lithotroph, okay, lithotroph, because they are dependent on the inorganic. So they are using inorganic compound. Okay, next one, let's have a look at the classification or group based on the energy source. Phototroph. Phototroph means organism that is able to do photosynthesis, that can convert photo, light, energy into food. Right? So phototroph are the photosynthesizers. Chemotrophs. Chemotrophs are organisms that can gain energy from chemical compound, either inorganic or organic. Right? Here, this table shows, what kind of energy source, example of energy source that the group requires for their metabolism and growth. Okay, we have here the autotroph or the one that use carbon dioxide. So if they are photoautotroph, they are using sunlight as the energy source. So phototroph, they use non-living environment. So sunlight is not an organism, right? That is the energy source for phototroph. Example, we have the photosynthetic organisms such as algae, plants, and cyanobacteria. Chemotroph, they are relying on the non-living environment. So where do they get this energy source? It is from the simple inorganic chemicals. What are the simple organic chemicals? For example, we have methane, right, as the inorganic chemicals. So only certain bacteria such as methanogens and deep sea vent bacteria can actually are actually the chemoautotroph. The other group is the heterotroph. We have the chemoheterotroph. There are two examples or two groups of the chemoheterotroph. So they are saprobe and parasite. So the energy source for chemoheterotroph relies on the other organism, nutrients from other organisms. So example of chemoheterotroph, in general, they are protozoa, fungi, many bacteria, and of course animals are chemoheterotroph. Well, saprobe is organism that metabolize organic matter from the dead organism, right? They don't kill organism, but instead they just use the waste, the dead organism. Example, fungi and bacteria that involve in the decomposition of matters, right? The second group is parasite. Parasite is also chemoheterotroph, but parasite lives in the living organism. So they utilize the tissues, fluids of a live host. For example, we have protozoa as parasite, virus as parasites. Um, so other things are, so mostly they are pathogens. Okay, and the last group is photoheterotroph, organism that use sunlight or an organic matter as the energy source. For example, we have purple and green photosynthetic bacteria. So those that involve in photosynthesis, they are photoheterotroph. Okay, here are more information about autotrophs and their energy source. Autotroph uses sunlight, all right? And then they convert the sunlight into organic matter, right? Photosynthetic bacteria or organism able to capture the energy of light rays and transform it into chemical energy that can be used in the cell metabolism. So normally they have special pigments that function to collect light and then convert it to the energy. So in this process, they convert the carbon dioxide into simple organic compounds such as glucose. Of course, you understand, you know about plants being the photosynthesizer, and algae and cyanobacteria are also important, especially in different environment. For plants, it's on land, kan? But algae and cyanobacteria are the photosynthesizer and the source of food to the other environment, for example, aquatic environment especially. So they are the primary producers in the ecosystem. They are the source of food for the other organisms. So they are the basis of food chain by providing nutrition to the heterotrophs. Okay, so these organisms, photosynthesizers or photoautotrophs, they are very important in the microbial community. Okay, the other group is chemoautotroph. So we have two terms here, which are chemo and auto. Keep chemical, they need chemical, but auto, they don't need other organism. So what are the examples of chemical or substances that does not come from organism? All right, so this group adapted to the most stringent nutritional strategy on earth. So they are actually extremophiles, where they don't need, or I mean, they must not extremophiles. So they actually live in an extreme environment. So when there is not much nutrients in the environment, but they can still live because they survive totally on inorganic substances such as hydrogen sulfide, ammonia, and iron. Okay, but there is no other nutrients. They only have these compounds or substances, for example, but these chemoautotrophs can survive. So they use all of these things as energy source, including all the elemental sulfur, the hydrogen gas, iron, nitrogen, and copper to convert this into food. And also, they don't need light, okay, nor organic nutrients. So where can you find this organism? You know, deep in the bed of the sea, where there is no light, and there is like, you know, hydrogen sulfur. So you can find all of these chemoautotrophs. If we don't have chemoautotroph organism, so basically other microbes or other organisms cannot survive because they are the one who are producing the food chain, the food in the chain. Example of the chemoautotrophic bacteria are the nitrogen, the involved in nitrogen cycle, which are the Nitrobacter and Nitrosomonas. So Nitrobacter is a gram-negative chemoautotrophic bacteria. It plays an important role in the nitrogen cycle by oxidizing the nitrite into nitrate in soils. Whereas Nitrosomonas, it's a rod shape as well. This bacteria oxidizes ammonia into nitrite in their metabolism, right? And these Nitrosomonas are useful in the treatment of industrial and sewage waste and in the process of bioremediation. Another chemoautotrophic bacteria or group are the methanogens. So methanogens are archaeons that live in extreme places such as hot spring and the frigid oceanic depths. And these methanogens are able to produce methane gas under anaerobic. Okay. For example, here we have two types of bacteria. Number one is called the Methanospirillum hungate. All right, so the morphology is spiral, spirillum. Okay, so and this archaeon found in the anaerobic habitat of soil and water. The other example is Methanococcus janashi. It's a motile archaeon that inhabit hot vents in the seafloor, and this bacterium uses hydrogen gas as the source of energy and convert it into methane. Okay, just now we talked about the chemoautotroph. Now let's have a look at the heterotroph, chemoheterotroph. So this group derive carbon and energy from the organic compound. Okay, chemo, chemical, hetero, relying on other living things. There are two groups. They are either the saprobes or parasites. Saprobes are those that live that are free living, that feed on the organic detritus from dead organisms. Usually they have rigid cell wall, so that means they cannot engulf the food. All right, and saprobes normally release enzymes in order to digest the food particles into smaller molecules. For example, examples of this group are free-living protozoa, fungi, and certain bacteria. The second one is parasites. Parasites grow in or on the body of a host and normally are harmful to some degree. They normally are pathogens. Those ectoparasites, the one that live on the body, endoparasite that live in the body. Bukan line, this is live in the body. Obligate parasites, those that are so dependent, they cannot live outside. For example, the bacillus, lactobacillus or syphilis spirochetes, as well as virus, they are obligate parasites. So the next subtopic in this topic is about elements of life. So previously, we talked about organic, inorganic compounds, So what are those compounds composed of? What are the elements in those compounds? So there are two different types of elements, the macro elements as well as the micro elements. Okay. So macro elements are the elements that are needed in large quantity or that are present in large quantity. Examples, COHNPL and SP. Do you know what are these? So these are actually carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen, sulfur, and phosphate. So this CHON SP ni is found in organic molecules such as protein, lipids, carbohydrate, and nucleic acids. Other elements in the microelements are potassium, calcium, magnesium, and ferrum. So these are cations and serve in a variety of roles, including enzymes and also enzymes that are involved in the biosynthesis. And these microelements are needed or are required in relatively large amounts. So you need a lot, in your cells, you have a lot of protein, lipids, and carbohydrate, right? So these are the major component in cells. So what are the elemental makeup that makes up the important biomolecules? Proteins, lipid, carbohydrate, and nucleic acid. So all of these biomolecules are actually a polymer, right? That is built up from a simple thing or simple molecule, such as a protein is produced by amino acid, and we have lipid, we have fatty acids, right? And then carbohydrate, we have sugar, glucose, fructose, and so on. Nucleic acid, we have the DNA, right? So protein, the elements consist of the CHONs, lipid CHOP, carbohydrate CHO, nucleic acid CHON. So it's very easy, right? All the biomolecule consists of CHO. Okay, these elements are very important, the building block for all the biomolecule, and the others are either present or not depending on the biomolecules. Let's have a look at the next slide where we have all the structure, chemical structure of the molecules. Can you identify what are these molecules are? So what is this? It has this H2N, and then we have long carbon chain there, and we have COOH. What is this? I would like you to identify what are these structure for and explain to your friend if you got the answer. All right. Okay, now let's have a look in detail about the elements. Carbon, it is one of the most important requirements for growth beside water, right? This carbon is very important in all organic compound. It is a structural backbone of living matter, okay? And where 50% dry cell weight of cells is actually carbon. Okay, we are actually carbon. 50% carbon. Okay, so let's have a look. The group of microbes, chemoheterotroph and chemoautotroph and photoautotroph. What are the source of carbon? Chemoheterotroph. Heterotroph, remember, it needs organic materials such as protein, carbohydrate, and lipid as the source of carbon. Whereas chemoautotroph or photoautotroph, they don't rely on the living organism, living matter, so they actually use carbon dioxide as the source of carbon. Most bacteria use some of the carbon-containing compound as an energy source. So this carbon-containing compound is very important because it is used to where microbes use in the catabolism process, breakdown of that carbon-containing compound, and to produce simple metabolite, and then it is being used as build-up block to synthesize cell components. Okay, so for example, fatty acid is used to construct the membrane cell membrane, right? Or the carbon is used to make up DNA and so on. Photoautotroph organisms reduce carbon dioxide to glucose and other organic molecules. So those that are involved in the photosynthesis, they can utilize this carbon dioxide and then produce organic compound, which are glucose and organic molecules for the cells, then use it for metabolism. And both autotroph and heterotroph can obtain energy from glucose, a carbon-containing molecules. So, and this glucose will go through different types of metabolism or pathway, glycolysis pathway, fermentation, and Krebs cycle. And this catabolic metabolism or catabolism will produce a lot of energy for the cells. They also synthesize some of the cell components from intermediates in the pathway. So they don't just produce energy from these metabolism. They can also use some of the other metabolites or component to proceed to other pathways. Okay, how about nitrogen, sulfur, and phosphorus? So where did you find these elements? So these elements are present in protein. So nitrogen and sulfur required for protein synthesis. Nitrogen and phosphate required for DNA synthesis, RNA and ATP. Okay, and nitrogen makes up 40% of the dry cell weight. It is very important. Whereas sulfur and phosphorus makes up only 4% of the cells. So the source of these elements can be from either external or through nitrogen fixation. The oxygen element, the requirements are different between different bacteria. So there are the different groups of bacteria depending on the oxygen requirement. Obligate means like compulsory. Obligate aerobes mean those that need oxygen. Without it, it will die. But facultative anaerobes, those that don't need oxygen actually, but they can live if there is oxygen. So they are actually anaerobic. They don't need oxygen, but if there is oxygen, they can also survive. But obligate anaerobes mean, compulsory, shouldn't be any oxygen. So if there is any oxygen, it will die. For example, those bacteria or microbes that live in the gut, right? So they don't have oxygen there. So you need to grow them anaerobically. In the rumen, cow rumen, they are also anaerobe. The next one is aerotolerant anaerobes. Okay, so These also are quite similar to facultative anaerobe. They can actually tolerate oxygen, uh, but you will see it depending. I mean, if you remember, if you are doing the Amali practical class, you can see the difference between the facultative anaerobe and the aerotolerant anaerobes, the distribution of the microbes in the test tube, right? Microaerosols though that can live, in limited amount of oxygen. And these are actually the detailed explanation about the oxygen requirement of the different groups. Okay, you can have a look and read it yourself. In this table, we have the detail about the definition of each of the different groups of bacteria or microbes, depending on their responses to environmental factor. So all of these terms, you must know what are the different types or the different name of the microbes, and then you must understand what does that means. So what are the example? At least you should know the most important one. So those that responds to solute and water activity. So we have the osmotolerant and halophile. Osmotolerant, able to grow over what range of water activity or osmotic concentration. So in here, for example, you put different different concentration of of compounds and see if there is if the microbes can survive. The next one is halophile. This one, the one that loves salt, right? And this group requires high levels of sodium chloride, usually above 0.2 millimolar to grow. So Halobacterium, Dunanella, Ectodospira. Okay. For the different pH, we have acidophile, neutrophile, and alkalophile. You should know what are the range or pH range that these organisms can grow and what are the examples. Okay, E. coli are normally neutrophile, live between 5.5 to 8.0. So acidophile normally yeast and this group of bacteria. Okay, whereas alkalophile normally bacillus, alkalophilus, nitrobacterium. So these are the few examples of these microbes. Temperature, we have psychotroph, and then mesophile, hyperthermophile, and hyperthermophile. So psychrophile grows at 0 degrees and has an optimum growth temperature of 15 degrees or lower. Psychotroph, it can grow between 0 to 7 and it has optimum temperature between 20 to and 30 degrees and a maximum around 35. So these are psychotroph. Okay, psychrophile. The bacteria must be able to grow below 15 degrees Celsius. Higher temperature, you can call it as psychotroph. So these are the examples of the bacteria. Mesophile is the one that can grow between 20 and 45 degrees. So normally those bacteria that cause pathogenic, cause disease are mesophiles. Why? Because our body temperature is about 37 degrees. So they should be able to grow optimally in that temperature. Thermophile, the one that can grow at 55 degrees and above, often optimum at 55 and 65 degrees. So Geobacillus, Thermus aquaticus, and so on are thermophile. Hyperthermophile are normally archeon and has optimum between 85 and about 113 degrees Celsius. So for example, sulfolobus, Spirococcus, Paradictum. Okay, also the next group is the depending on the oxygen concentration, we have the 5 different group. Okay, um, and the requirement just now I have explained, and the different types. You can have a look at these examples. Okay, and then lastly, barophile grow more rapid at high hydrostatic pressure. Okay, those that live under the sea that have different pressure, right? For example, profundum, Photobacterium profundum, Schwannella bentica. Okay, so we need, if you want to grow it in the lab, you need to apply some pressure to it in order for it to survive or grow. Okay, so now we talk about the macro elements. Can we have the CHON NPS? CHON PS. All right, now we have the micronutrient. So micronutrient is also called trace elements. It is required in small quantity, in trace amounts only. And then these examples of the trace elements are the manganese, zinc, cobalt, molybdenum, nickel, and copper. Is it copper? Cuprum. Is it the same? Anyway, I'll check that one. Okay, so required required interest elements, and all of these micronutrients often supply in water or in media components. Okay, you just need to add a little bit. So we normally prepare it in separate as trace in a solution called trace elements. We have the different types of the elements, and then in just a small amount, and then when we don't add it one by one in the media because it will be tedious. So we prepare it in one bottle and call it as trace solution or trace elements. So, and these elements are ubiquitous in nature, and these elements are important as the cofactors for protein structure, as well as important to enzyme function. Okay, we have completed everything on this topic. Now I would like you to do a self-review based on these questions. So can you answer all of these questions after you learn about or after you listen to my lecture? So can you actually answer all of these questions by yourself? Of course, you cannot just rely on my lecture. You need to also read your textbook or read papers or listen to other videos, lecture videos on this topic in order for you to have a better understanding about this topic. So now if you look at these questions, can you try to answer all of these questions. If you're able to answer all of these questions, that means the learning outcome is achieved for the first part of this topic. So the same thing. So we have more question here. Even I have also touched about this this question, right? So why are most pathogens mesophiles? And then examples of obligate intracellular parasites. Of course, you need find examples. You need to find examples, and then classify a human with respect to oxygen requirement. So what are we actually? Can we live without oxygen? Are we microaerophiles? Last question, where in the body anaerobic habitats apt to be found? Okay, where is it? It's like semua soalan ni senang je kan? Okay, so that's all for the first part of this topic.